Okay, welcome. I'm glad that I got the chance to speak at Drupal Dev Days again. I hope you still have some energy left to follow me into this rabbit hole of Mailer-related core issues. I did prepare a short introduction, but I also planned in lots of time for Q&A and discussions. My hope is that this will be more of a workshop, less of a lecture. So please do not hesitate to chip in during the introduction, even more so afterwards. A quick side note, I'm not too keen about pictures of me floating around the internet and social media. If you take photos, then please contact me before publishing them. Speaking of pictures, there is no need to make photos of the slides. The deck is available online. I've included many links and some example code. Just snap the QR code and then follow that. So that's easier to find the links. Hope that worked for everybody. So my name is Lorenz. I'm one of 50-ish people forming the cooperative Infolink, which is publishing the Swiss weekly newspaper Wochenzeitung WOZ. I'm part of a small team of developers looking after the website, mobile apps, and internal tools. I've been a regular contributor to Drupal core and the maintainer of a couple of contrib projects. During the past 3 years, my main focus was on bringing in the Symfony Mailer component into core. In summer 2023, I took the chance to host a core conversation at Drupal Developer Days in Vienna. The recording is available on the Dev Days YouTube channel. If you're interested in the backstory of the current Mail API, the Vienna session contains some research on the origin of hook mail. So several people from the community gathered in Ghent for another core conversation in May 2024. And the objectives for today is I'd like to summarize what happened since Vienna and where I hope the journey will be going. This talk is an update to the one I had in Ghent in 2024. So Symfony Mailer is a library maintained in the Symfony source tree since Symfony 4.4. It provides pluggable transports covering many protocols and supports cloud messaging services out of the box. A couple of Drupal contrib modules integrate with Symfony Mailer components on various levels. Drupal 10.2 was the first release of Drupal shipping with Symfony Mailer component as a core dependency. That release also includes an experimental mail plugin based on Symfony Mailer. This plugin is capable of sending messages over any of the transport included by default with Symfony Mailer. The Drupal 10.2 plugin doesn't expose any administrative UI. Sites may opt in by shipping an appropriate config snippet via settings PHP. The experimental Symfony Mailer-based mail plugin is designed to work as a drop-in replacement of the existing core PHP mail plugin. As a result, it also suffers from the same limitations, especially the Symfony Mailer plugin doesn't support building and sending HTML emails. The Symfony Mailer component supports pluggable third-party transports. Also, events are fired before and after messages are sent, but these features were initially left out as well in order to avoid interference with the upcoming new Mail API. So as an initial step to start supporting these features, an experimental Mailer module providing access to the Symfony Mailer service via the dependency injection container was committed into the 11 branch last year. Actually, that was while dev days Leuven or shortly after. So the experimental model ensures that developers need to explicitly opt in order to use the new API, and that the risk of conflicts with existing core and contrib mail API is kept as a minimum. The scope of issue 33, 79, 79, 40 explicitly exclude the mail building part of the new mailer API. So the new mailer module at its current state is unusable for anything else than experimentation and barely deserves its alpha status. Still, will the experimental mailer module ship with 11.4 or 12 later this year? This really depends on a couple of things. First of all, it's a question of whether or not we as a community manage to agree on a vision how mail building should look like in the future. In order to figure that out, I reached out to people who showed interest into that subject in the past. We established a monthly planning meetings, the first one in July 2025. The last one we held was a week ago, and there's already one scheduled in 2 weeks. We currently keep 3 issues open on Drupal.org to track our progress. We use the meta issue as the backlog. Every mailer-related issue is added as a child there. Issues which are planned or in progress or done are linked from the beta roadmap issue. That's the second one. And the discussions about requirements and strategy happens in the third issue. The last one is the most noisy, but ultimately also the most interesting if you like to be on top of what we're doing. The process did not result in any actionable plan yet, but the regular meetings help to keep the conversation alive. Some vertical prototypes have been developed in order to get an end-to-end view of the proposed approaches. First, I want to talk a little bit more about the process and later about the implementations. So it became apparent that there are different views and scope of the project. For example, in order to send a password reset email, it is necessary to figure out the text in the correct language, the password reset link, and destination email address. Figuring out these parameters could be in scope or out of scope depending on where we draw the line. Not everybody has the same ideas on how a project of this size should be tackled on a technical level. It was proposed to create detailed specifications before attempting to start development. At the same time, vertical prototypes have been created in order to test out ideas. Planning people and prototyping people seem to have difficulties to understand each other intentions. But the group is making progress, and it's becoming easier to discuss proposals and take decisions. Some things helped us to bring the group forward. The requirements issue has a list of user stories. That format made it easier to talk about requirements without having to discuss implementation details. Discussing the user stories also prompted feedback from contributors. For example, there have been security issues with contrib modules, which we should avoid from the start. A user story helped to uncover that. So now I like to leave the organizational challenges for a moment and talk about things we tried on the technical side. So the first prototype tried to declare each email as a single directory component. The idea there was to introduce the twig template as the primary method of defining an email. An SDC allows for metadata and also provides means to declare the necessary parameters. On the other hand, SDC are really design components. Reusing them as the primary way to define transactional emails stretched this use case too much. One attempt was to focus on the call side, and especially on entities. I'm observing that transactional email is often bound to an entity. For example, the password reset email is tied to a user entity. The contact email is tied to a contact message entity. and the commerce or received email is tied to an order entity. Entity displays and view modes are used by site builders and developers to configure and tweak how content is presented when rendered in a browser. Entity forms and form modes are used to customize forms. What if entity mail modes would become the canonical way to configure how mail is rendered in a recipient's inbox? This idea was postponed. It is too high level at this time, and it doesn't really help with simpler use cases, like with the update status notification, which isn't an entity. Another prototype proposed to define each email as a tandem of config entity and a plugin. This is much like block and actions are working today. Each module will provide every email type in its default configuration. When a module is enabled, the email config is installed. Many aspects of an email will become configurable right out of the box. The problem with this approach is that Drupal is moving towards receipts. And receipts currently do not encourage to install module default config. Also, there is a risk that site builders accidentally might remove config for a required email. For example, the password reset. This could result in errors when a module attempts to send an email which was deleted in config. So a well-known pattern in Drupal and Symfony applications is routes and controllers. Issue 35.39.65.1 tried to apply this pattern to mail building. Authors of page controls may choose the method signature freely. There is no specific interface a control must implement. Instead, the argument resolver takes a look at the method arguments and dynamically fills them with route parameters. The result invoking a controller method often is a render array, which is then subsequently turned into a HTML page. Emails could be built in a similar way. A module email YAML file could list the emails for a module and specify controller and default parameters for each one. When an email is rendered, the argument resolver figures out how to invoke the controller, and the resulting render arrays is rendered into the email body. However, there has been feedback that the developer experience of the module routing YAML file isn't that great. It is often difficult to figure out what goes where, especially defaults and options are confusing. So we ditched that idea as well. What we're working at the moment is a hybrid plugin. It is a simplification of the YAML plugin idea. So all of the email building logic could be collocated in a plugin base class. The rendering and sending logic on the plugin manager. The spirit behind this proposal is to make it really, really easy to implement simple emails. At the same time, provide the necessary extension points to allow for complex use cases and modifications. Let's look at an example. So here we have just a YAML block which is declaring an email in a module.emails.yaml file. The call site just receives the instance from the plugin manager, adds the Twig parameters and sends it off. So my hope is that it could be as easy as that. There's maybe you see the HTML body template that points to a theme. Theme function, so we could freely declare that whatever is necessary. For more complex use cases, module authors may introduce their own plugin classes and decorate it with the email attribute. So this hybrid approach has the slight disadvantage that you have to look in two places in order to find all emails a module declares. This hybrid approach has a precedent in Drupal core. Layouts are made a little bit like that. So you have layouts YAML file in themes, but you also can declare layouts as attribute plugins. One of the goals for the beta mailer module is that it should be safe to enable and disable when the experimental module is on. When the experimental module is on, core mails should be handled by it. When it is off, the site should behave exactly as before enabling it. While building the prototype, we realized that it isn't easily achieved for some of the core mails. User mails and update mails still are invoked using procedural functions. So we worked on 2 issues to extract those functions into replaceable services. We worked on this effort hand in hand with the people who are attempting to deprecate all the module files. So that was a good coincidence that we had shared goals there. So now, probably the question who all of you have, how do you migrate from DSM Plus or DSM Lite or whatever you are using now? Short answer is, I have no idea. My hope would be that we could first look at how we want to manage transactional email in the future, and that we talk about migrating and compatibility in the second step. I'd like to avoid a situation where the new API will suffer from similar limitations than the old one, only because of compatibility reasons. So that was the introduction. I'd like to thank Adam, the maintainer of Drupal Symphony Mail Plus, Christoph, Clara, who did the coordination and also facilitating our meetings, Sasha, who is the maintainer of Mail System and a big contributor everywhere in Drupal, and Wayne, who is the maintainer of Drupal Symphony MailerLite. Those are the people who are meeting or have been meeting regularly since last year. And of course, I want to thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward for the discussion now.
Thank you. As someone who hasn't really been following this, could you maybe recap what the high-level problem is that the module should solve? Because one of the things I see in all of the proof of concepts and all the things you're trying is that it sounds like it's really focused on ahead of time defining what the email is, and I'm not really familiar with what the have we solved the low-level developer problem of defining the data structure for all the data that an email should contain? Because it sounds like if you've solved that, then you can implement any type of storage layer on top of that. Like all the prototypes seem viable if you have a shared data type of what data is represented in email. Maybe as a naive thought.
Yes, so the Symphony Mailer library provides a data structure for email. It's the email object, which is already having all what we need in terms of properties. So like all the headers we need, mail bodies like text and HTML body, also multi-part like other things. It basically implements the MIME standard for email. And on top of that, we want to have an integration which is, or I think the main thing is we want to integrate it with the Drupal render layer. Because that's what people in the Drupal community are familiar with. If it's possible to just render an entity into an email, then many of the use cases are solved already. So we're trying to bridge that thing. It sounds like a sounds
No,
like
I
an
see,
easy
yeah.
thing. It should be easy, actually. So, yeah.
Maybe to expand, I think one step back, the problem we're trying to solve about the current mail API is basically that most things are not standardized. There is no standard way to send attachments. There's no standard way to send HTML emails. It's like every single module that is a transport makes up its own API. It's just an array we pass around. And there's some kind of standards on like which key you should set for an attachment, but they're not the same in all the different modules. So if you use the SMTP module, you might need to build your email in a different way than if you use some other module to send them. And we are trying to have a shared API in Drupal core. So we have one way to build HTML mails, to send them, to alter them, and basically as part of that, I guess deeply said, I don't know, 10, 20 plus contrib modules, the mail system, SMTP, and many others, except for really advanced use cases that people have.
So I've counted over 600 mail-related issues. I haven't read them all, but I have examined many of them.
But that sounds like a lower level issue than those.
So we want to replace that. So the idea is to replace the current RI-based freeform YOLO style and provide a shared API where everyone can hook into it.
So the Symfony mailer solves some of these problems. It has standard APIs for an HTML string. It has standard APIs for an attachment file. But we also have our alter hooks and the translation stuff. So basically, Symfony, the mailer object, is a type cast on a string object, which means like the usual translation problems of translatable strings and markups and so on. We want to have like a scope in which we like, similar to what we discussed, is that we have like a scope of the language, the user, the context, and inside that you can build and alter the email in a standardized way, and then we pass it to Symfony, and then we send it out. That's the goal.
Have you checked how other PHP framework send emails? Like Laravel, how do they build their own email plugins and how do they send them?
So I've looked at the Symfony mailer, of course. I haven't looked at Laravel.
The code that you had in some slides are almost similar to how Laravel tries to send an email. It has a template, and it's the actual HTML, not even Twig. That's another thing, but yeah. It loads parameters, and they send it directly. So you may get some ideas on how they use it and how can we implement it in Drupal.
I will take a look. Thank you for suggesting.
I don't have a solution, but I can give you another complication, if that helps.
Yes, please.
One of the, so I work for Open Social, and one of the things we sometimes have is someone does something on a platform, and now we suddenly need to notify 2,000 users. What we've found is that everything breaks down if you try to do that as 2,000 separate emails, but thankfully most large email providers have bulk email services. The thing that is then required is to basically delay replacing the final placeholders and keeping all of the variables separate so that you can transmit that as part of your one API call. Because I've seen, you had some code on there which basically said set variables and then send email. like that would break that scenario because you would be putting user data, rendering it inside the template, and you kind of want to render some placeholders instead and provide the data out of bound to the email service. So something that could support that would be amazing.
Yes. So the send, actually, let's go to the send. That should be somewhere here. So the send is actually a wrapper around the Symfony Mail transports. And the Symfony Mail transports integrate, as it's committed in Drupal core, integrate seamlessly with Symfony Messenger. And Symfony Messenger is like a queue worker. So it's possible right now to use Symfony messaging queue in order to like defer the sending of the email to some queue. So that part is solved. I'm not sure about the 2000 the 2000 replacements where they made. So I'm not sure whether we would create 2000 mails here at the call site and then batch them in the queue.
So there's transactional email providers, and we've seen this with a few different possible providers where you only need to send them one API request with the email and then a JSON list of replacement values separately. And the email service itself will take care of the replacement because the communication between the web server and the email provider is the most expensive. And who does the replacement doesn't really matter. So you shift that across the wire.
If there's a Symfony Mail transport which is doing that, then it's possible to do it.
Okay. I would have to look that up. I think.
But
I don't know what we use currently.
We should look at that.
Thanks for your talk. I don't know, I missed the beginning, unfortunately, so I don't mention this. We have the use case often of having like custom, like project-specific mail templates that are configurable in the user interface, similar to like the user notification emails. And with your YAML-based plugin thingy, that almost kind of looks like a config thing. So I was just wondering if there's like something like having like user configurable email templates, if that's something that you've thought about, that's definitely in scope anyways, or is definitely not in scope, or in general just your thoughts on that in light of this.
Yes, so user-defined, like overridable in the backend, I think that's contrib scope. So there's already an existing contrib module which is doing that. It's easy email. I hope that this. So we have Wayne in the team who is the maintainer of easy email. I cannot imagine a situation where he builds something for core which is not working with easy email later on. So I think that use case should be covered, but I think it's contrib.
Yeah, that's fine. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, thanks for the answer. I wasn't aware of that email, so that sounds perfect. Thanks.
I was following quite a lot your work, so I was also in Drupal camp in Ruhr. We also met, and it's this whole discussion and all this movement of Symfony Mailer into core takes quite a lot of time already. And no offense, but the question is like, what do you think is preventing the Symfony module mailer to come into, and like what can we do and help that it's going faster? And then because now all this EI initiative, Drupal CMS initiative, all these initiatives, they really move fast and they have decisions really fast. Maybe they are not good in the short term or long term, but they are doing this a bit faster than this is happening. So what do you think, how this can move faster, and what do you lack? Help or people or somebody who makes decision, or like how to make it faster so that we see the nice Symfony mailer finally in core? Thank you.
So I think for me personally, I don't have this pressure. So if somebody is in the team who really wants to move forward, why not? But so me as a contributor here, I don't have a deadline. I don't need to push for it. So it's just moving at the pace of, basically we have our monthly meetings. Meetings are Wednesday, and at the weekend beforehand, people are frantically preparing their stuff, and then in the meeting we discuss it, and then 1 month is just passed without much movement. I mean, it's like that. So if we have like a community or a group which wants to move faster, then we're moving faster. At the moment, it's just the pace we have. So I invite you all. The next meeting is, I guess I have it here somewhere in the list. That's the backup slides, I guess. So the next meeting is May 6th. You find the link and to the meeting in the Symfony Slack. You're welcome to join.
Maybe
I'll be happy to have some more faces there.
Maybe to add, I think the initiatives you mentioned are mostly not in core, and core tends to move slower. Consensus finding is slower in core. But a specific way to help would be that YAML plugin issue. So if you're here on Saturday, are on the sprint, that would be a very good issue to pick up. I'm not here anymore, maybe.
I'm there, yeah.
Yes.
The whole Saturday I'm there.
So that would be a great issue to work on. There's a lot of work there. There's a proof of concept merge request. We need to test it. We need to write documentation for it. So there's a lot of work on that specific issue. And right now the main blocker is getting that issue to a state where it's reviewable, properly reviewable and testable.
Yeah, it's not even passing PHP Stan or PHP CS at the moment, so it's really just proof of concept code. Yeah. 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 But they have easy email and USM Lite, so they're fine. So anything else you want to tell me where your pain points are with email, or where you think it should go? Suggestions? Otherwise, I think we can close the session, and I want to thank you again for attending.